Lights were already on when I pulled into the parking lot, and that was the first thing that didn't feel right. It was 6:40 in the morning. My bakery didn't open until 9. The only person with a key besides me was my manager, and he wasn't supposed to be there until 8. I sat in my car for a moment, engine still running, staring at the warm glow coming through the front window of the shop I had built from nothing over the past 32 years. I told myself it was probably nothing, a timer I'd forgotten to adjust. The cleaning crew had been in the night before. Maybe someone left a switch on. I was 63 years old, and I had been running Sycamore Street Bakery since I was 31, and in 32 years I had learned that most things that feel wrong in the early morning are just the result of a tired mind and too much coffee. I got out of the car. The morning was cool for late September in Asheville, North Carolina. My breath made small clouds as I walked across the parking lot, my keys already in my hand. I was 3 steps from the front door when someone called out from behind me. "Mum?" I turned. It was the man from the HVAC company. He'd been servicing our walk-in cooler the afternoon before and must have come back early to finish some work. I recognized him but couldn't remember his name. Stocky, probably mid-40s, wearing a grey uniform with a company patch on the chest. He was standing near the side of the building, holding a clipboard, and his expression stopped me cold. He didn't look like a man about to say good morning. "Don't go in the front," he said. He glanced at the door, then back at me, and lowered his voice even though we were alone in the parking lot. "I got here about 20 minutes ago to finish up the cooler work. The side entrance was unlocked. When I came around to knock on the front and let you know I was already inside." He paused. "I heard voices, 2 of them, in your office." I stared at him. "What do you mean, voices?" "I mean people talking. I didn't want to interrupt. I figured maybe you'd come in early. But then I saw your car pull in just now, and I thought—" He stopped, looked at the door again. "I think you should hear it before they know you're here." Everything in me wanted to dismiss him, to smile politely and say thank you, there's probably a reasonable explanation, and push open my own front door. But there was something in his face. Not alarm exactly, more like the careful expression of someone who has already heard something he can't unhear, and is choosing very deliberately not to tell me what it was. I followed him around the side of the building. He had propped the service entrance open with a rubber wedge. We stepped inside quietly, into the back hallway that ran alongside the kitchen. The bakery was dark back here except for the ambient light coming through the pass-through window. The smell was familiar. Flour, sugar, the ghost of yesterday's cinnamon rolls, and for a moment it grounded me. This was my place. I had mopped that floor. I had chosen that tile. My office was at the end of the hall. The door was slightly open. I heard my manager's voice first. I had known him for 11 years. I had hired him when he was 28 years old, fresh out of a restaurant management program, eager and sharp and grateful for the chance. I had given him a salary, health insurance, profit sharing. I had gone to his wedding. I had sent flowers when his mother passed. He was talking to someone I didn't recognize, a man from the voice, speaking in clipped, efficient sentences. "She's not going to fight it," my manager was saying. "She's 63, she's tired. She's been talking about stepping back for 2 years. If we move the accounts before the anniversary event, she won't even know what to look for. She barely checks the wholesale invoices anymore." A pause, then the other voice, and the daughter. "Completely in the dark. She handles the front-of-house events side. She doesn't touch the financials. It'll look like a billing error for months." "How much are we talking?" "Between the catering contract deposits and the wholesale pre-orders for the holiday season," my manager's voice dropped slightly, "close to 200,000. Maybe more if we roll in the equipment lease buyouts." I pressed my back against the wall. My legs felt strange. Not weak, exactly. More like the floor had shifted slightly beneath me, the way it does in those first disorienting seconds of an earthquake before you understand what's happening. $200,000. My catering deposits, my holiday pre-orders, money that customers had trusted me with, wedding clients, corporate accounts, the church on Merriman Avenue that ordered 50 dozen rolls every Thanksgiving. Money that was sitting in accounts with my name on them, and apparently someone else's hands in them. 32 years. I had built this from a single rented storefront and a $4,000 loan from my father-in-law. I had worked through 2 recessions, a flood that destroyed my original kitchen, and a global pandemic that nearly took everything. I had made payroll during months when I couldn't pay myself. I had turned down 3 buyout offers because I believed in what this place meant to this neighborhood. And the man I had trusted to help me run it was standing in my office at 6:40 in the morning, calculating how long it would take me to notice I'd been robbed. The HVAC technician was watching me from 2 feet away. He had the look of a man waiting to see if the person next to him is going to need to sit down. I straightened. I took a breath. I pulled out my phone. I texted my daughter. Come to the bakery now. Side entrance. Don't call me. Just come. She was there in 11 minutes. She lived 8 blocks away. I met her at the side door, and I watched her face change as I told her, quietly and quickly, what I had heard. She is not a woman who cries easily. She gets that from me. But her eyes went sharp in a way I recognized. It was the look she used to get as a little girl when someone was unfair to her on the playground. Not hurt. Focused. "How long do we have before he notices you're here?" she asked. "I don't know. I usually come through the front. He might not know I'm in the building." She looked at the HVAC technician who was still standing there with his clipboard. "Did they see you?" "No, ma'am. I came straight back out when I heard them." She nodded. Then she looked at me. "Okay, we need to get into the system before he does anything this morning." My daughter had never been involved in the financial side of the business. She ran our event bookings and managed our social media, things she was genuinely talented at. But she was also the person who had, quietly and without being asked, helped me digitize 30 years of paper records 2 summers ago. She knew the filing system. She knew where things lived. We went into the small storage room across from my office, and she opened her laptop, and I gave her my login, and we started putting records. What we found took about 40 minutes to piece together, and every minute of it felt like reading a letter written in a language I hadn't known I needed to understand. It started small. A catering deposit from a client in February, received, logged, then quietly redirected to a vendor account I didn't recognize. The vendor account had a business name that looked almost identical to one of our legitimate suppliers, 1 letter different, the kind of thing you would read past 100 times if you weren't looking for it. There were 11 of those transactions going back 14 months. Then there were the wholesale pre-orders. Bakeries like mine take large pre-orders in September and October for the holiday season. November and December are our biggest revenue months. Clients pay deposits, sometimes the full amount, upfront. Those deposits were in our system, but when my daughter traced them to the actual bank account, 3 of them had been split, half logged correctly, half redirected. The redirected amounts totaled $186,000. And then there was something else. In a folder labeled simply Admin, Legacy, buried under 3 years of mundane operational files, my daughter found a draft document. It was a sale agreement. My bakery's name was in it. A buyer's LLC was in it. The agreed price was significantly below market value, and my manager's personal email address was in the CC field. He had been in conversations with the buyer, a buyer I had never spoken to, a buyer who, based on the document date, had been communicating with my manager for 8 months. I sat with that for a long moment. He hadn't just been stealing money. He had been positioning himself to sell my business out from under me. My guess was that he planned to manufacture a financial crisis. use the missing funds to make the bakery look like it was struggling, then present himself as a solution, a management buyout at a distressed price. It was the kind of scheme that only works if the owner is too overwhelmed or too trusting to look closely at the numbers. He had read me correctly on both counts. I had been overwhelmed. I had been trusting. I had also turned 63 3 months ago and had started privately wondering what the next chapter looked like. I thought about that for exactly 30 seconds. Then I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and called my accountant. My accountant had done my books since I opened. She was 71 now, semi-retired, but she picked up on the second ring because she always picked up on the second ring, and I loved her for it. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment. "Send me everything," she said. "I'll call you back in an hour." She called back in 50 minutes. "You need to call an attorney before you do anything else. This isn't just a civil matter. What you're describing is wire fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, potentially criminal. Do not confront him. Do not let him know you've seen anything. Can you get through the day normally?" "I've gotten through harder days than this." "I know you have, honey." Her voice was dry and warm at the same time, which is a very specific skill. "I'm emailing you a name. He's a business litigation attorney. He handles this kind of thing. Call him this morning." My daughter was still sitting across from me in the storage room. I looked at her and said quietly, "We're going to need to act like everything is normal today." She exhaled slowly. "It's the anniversary event in 4 days." I knew that. 4 days until the celebration. I had been planning for 6 months. 32 years of Sycamore Street Bakery, a party for the neighborhood, for our longtime customers, for the people who had kept us alive through all of it. I had rented a tent. I had ordered custom decorations. I had personally called every wholesale client who had been with us for more than 10 years. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my manager's voice again. "She's 63. She's tired. She's been talking about stepping back." And I thought, yes, I have been tired. That part was true. But tired and finished are two very different things. I called the attorney. He was in by 8:30 and he listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he asked me 3 questions, all precise, and then said, "Don't touch the accounts. Don't move money. Don't make transfers. Don't change passwords today. We want everything exactly as it is when we bring this to the DA's office, which I'd like to do by end of week. Can you keep him in place through the weekend?" "He's supposed to work the anniversary event Saturday." A brief pause. "Even better. Keep Saturday exactly as planned." The next 4 days were the longest of my life, and also, strangely, some of the most clarifying. I went into work each morning and I did what I always did. I checked the baking schedule. I walked the floor. I spoke to my staff, most of whom had worked for me for years and had no idea what was happening in the margins of their workday. I had conversations with my manager that required me to look him in the eye and respond to ordinary things he said about flour deliveries and staffing schedules, and I did it. Because 32 years of running a business teaches you to keep your expression where you want it, regardless of what's happening underneath. He had no idea. I did tell one person on my staff, the woman who had been my head baker for 17 years. She came in at 4 in the morning. She knew every account. She had keys to everything. And frankly, she deserved to know. I told her on Wednesday morning in the walk-in cooler, standing between racks of proofing dough. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "I knew something was off. I didn't know what." "What do you mean?" "About 8 months ago, I noticed a vendor invoice that looked strange. The name was almost the same as Westbrook Supplies, but the address was different. I mentioned it to him, and he said it was a subsidiary they'd restructured. I believed him." She looked at me steadily. "I should have come to you." "You couldn't have known," I said. "I should have come to you anyway." I thought about that later, about how many small things had been visible to the people around me. if any of us had known to look. My head baker noticing a strange invoice. The HVAC technician standing still in a hallway because something felt wrong. My daughter knowing my filing system well enough to find a hidden folder in 40 minutes. I had spent 32 years building something, and I had also, without fully realizing it, built a circle of people around it who cared whether it survived. My manager had looked at my business and seen a tired woman who wasn't paying attention. He had been wrong about what he was looking at. Saturday came. The tent was up by 7. We had tables along the sidewalk, a custom cake with a fondant replica of the original storefront, and a photo wall that my daughter had spent 2 weeks putting together. Pictures from every decade, employees past and present, customers who had been coming since we opened. The neighborhood showed up the way this neighborhood always shows up, which is generously and early, and by 10 in the morning, the line stretched down the block. My manager arrived at 8:30, dressed nicely, carrying a tray of sample boxes he'd had printed with the bakery logo. He was charming, as always. He greeted customers. He helped with setup. He told someone from the local paper that it was a privilege to have been part of such a special institution. I watched him say it. At 11:15, 2 men I didn't recognize came through the tent entrance and stood near the back. My attorney had told me to expect them. They were not in uniform. They waited until my manager was standing slightly apart from the crowd, between the display table and the back of the tent, and then they approached him, and there was a conversation that lasted less than 3 minutes, and then he was gone. Just like that. One moment he was standing at my anniversary party, and then he wasn't. Several customers noticed. Most didn't. The music kept playing. My head baker, who was stationed behind the sample table, caught my eye from across the tent and gave me a single nod. My daughter, who was standing near the photo wall, took a slow breath and turned back to the family she'd been talking to and resumed the conversation as though nothing had happened. The party went on for 4 more hours. I served cake. I accepted hugs from people who had known me for 20 years. I talked to a woman who told me she had brought her children to this bakery every Saturday morning for a decade, and now her children were bringing their children. I stood outside the tent at one point, in the cool October air, and looked at the original storefront sign that I had never replaced, weathered and slightly faded, the paint on the Ez and sycamore gone a little uneven, and I allowed myself exactly 1 minute to feel the weight of everything that had happened. Then I went back inside. The legal process took most of the winter. There were interviews, depositions, document reviews. The buyer's LLC was investigated, and eventually the buyer was separately charged for his role in what the DA's office classified as a conspiracy to commit fraud. The redirected money, most of it was recovered. Not all. Some had already moved through accounts in ways that took longer to trace, and the final recovery number was closer to 160,000 than 186. My attorney told me this was, under the circumstances, an unusually good outcome. My manager pleaded guilty in March. I wasn't in the courtroom. I didn't need to be. I spent that morning at the bakery. There is something I've been thinking about since all of this happened, something that took me a long time to be able to say out loud. When my manager told that man in my office that I was tired and ready to step back, he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been thinking about the future, about what comes after, about whether I wanted to keep doing this and what it would look like if I did. I had just never thought about it with someone who wanted to take that decision away from me. Here is what I know now that I didn't know before. I had been so focused on what I'd built over 32 years that I hadn't looked carefully at the people standing next to me while I built it. My head baker, who comes in at 4 every morning without complaint and notices strange invoices and tells me the truth in walk-in coolers. My daughter, who digitized my entire filing system 2 years ago because she wanted to understand what I'd spent my life doing. A man from an HVAC company whose name I still have to look up in my phone. Terrence. his name is Terence, who stood in a parking lot and said, "Don't go in the front," and waited to make sure I heard him. I had almost walked past all of them. I don't know exactly what the next chapter looks like. I'm still working on that. But I know I'm the one writing it. And I know that when I eventually do step back, whenever that day comes, it will be on my terms, in my time, with my name still on the door. I kept the bakery. I kept the 32 years. And the morning after my manager's guilty plea, I came in early, turned on the lights myself, and made the cinnamon rolls from scratch, the way I used to do it when I was the only one here. Just me and the smell of sugar and yeast, and something that had survived long enough to become worth protecting. That's the part no one can take from you once you've built it. I've thought a lot about the moment I was standing in that parking lot, keys in my hand, about to walk through my own front door. 32 years of early mornings, of flour on my hands before the sun came up, of making payroll during months I couldn't pay myself. And I almost walked straight into the thing that would have ended all of it, not because I was careless, because I'd stopped paying attention to the right things. That's the part that stays with me. My manager had read me correctly on the surface. I was tired. I had been talking about stepping back. What he miscalculated, what people like him always miscalculate, is that being tired is not the same as being finished, and being trusting is not the same as being blind. The actions he took, all 14 months of redirected deposits and forged vendor names and quiet conversations with buyers I never knew existed, those actions carried their own weight. They accumulated, and eventually that weight became evidence, and evidence became a courtroom, and the courtroom became a guilty plea in March. That's simply how it goes. What you build in the dark doesn't stay there forever. But I don't want to spend too much time on him. He's the least interesting part of this story. What I keep coming back to is Terence, a man I had to look up in my phone to remember his name, standing in a parking lot at 6:40 in the morning, choosing to say something when it would have been so much easier to say nothing. He didn't know me. He owed me nothing except a completed work order, but he stood there and said, "Don't go in the front," and waited to make sure I heard him. That kind of decency is quiet, and it doesn't announce itself, and I think it's rarer than we acknowledge. And my daughter, who spent 2 years ago digitizing 30 years of paper files, not because I asked her to, but because she wanted to understand what I'd built. She didn't do that for a reason she could name at the time. She just did it because she loved the place and wanted to know it. And then the morning came when that knowledge was exactly what we needed, and she sat across from me in a storage room and found the truth in 40 minutes. And my head baker, standing between racks of proofing dough at 4 in the morning, telling me she'd noticed something strange 8 months ago and had believed the explanation she was given, and then saying, without any defensiveness, I should have come to you anyway. That kind of honesty, offered plainly and without excuse, is its own form of courage. What I understand now is that I had been measuring my business by what I could see, the revenue, the reviews, the line out the door on Saturday mornings. I hadn't been paying attention to the people standing next to me while I built it. I hadn't looked clearly at who was worth trusting and who had simply gotten comfortable with my trust. That's the lesson I carry. Not bitterness about what almost happened, but clarity about what I was looking at and choosing not to see. A business, a life, anything worth protecting, it doesn't survive on its own strength alone. It survives because of the people around it who choose when the moment comes to do the right thing, the decent thing, the honest thing, even when it costs them something. I came in the morning after the guilty plea, turned the lights on myself, and made cinnamon rolls from scratch. Just me in the kitchen at 5 in the morning, the way it was at the beginning, and I thought, this is still here, I'm still here. Whatever comes next, I'm the one deciding it. That's not a small thing. That's everything.